I've lived beside this old cemetery for longer than I care to admit, and for years it was nothing more than a quiet neighbor, a place I barely noticed except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the wind rattling a crooked headstone. It was the kind of place people drive by and forget exists, tucked away behind an overgrown fence, the kind of cemetery where the trees grow thick and the sunlight rarely reaches the ground. I never thought much about it until last fall. That's when the nights began to feel different, heavier, as if the darkness itself had a weight that pressed against my chest. It started one evening when I stepped onto my porch just as the sun was sinking behind the hills. The sky was bruised with purple and orange, and the cemetery beyond my backyard looked like nothing more than shadows stretching across the earth. That's when I noticed the lights. At first, I thought it was fireflies, small and erratic, drifting lazily between the graves. But then I realized they weren't random. They moved with intention, tracing lines from one headstone to the next, dipping and rising in ways no natural creature would. I froze on the steps, squinting through the dim light, and felt my stomach twist. Curiosity pulled me forward despite the unease settling in my bones. As I stepped off the porch, the air thickened. There was a damp, earthy smell that made my mouth dry, a smell that carried something ancient and unsettled. I walked slowly across the yard, each step cautious, the gravel crunching under my boots like I was announcing my presence to something I didn't want to confront. That's when I noticed the shadows. They weren't cast by trees or monuments. They moved independently, shifting between the graves with a deliberate, almost predatory rhythm. I could feel them watching, a pressure in the darkness that made my skin crawl. I wanted to turn back, to retreat to the safety of my house, but something held me there, rooted, as if the cemetery itself demanded I stay and see. I saw a figure kneeling by a gravestone. It rocked slowly back and forth, muttering words I couldn't understand, a whisper that rose and fell with a cadence that felt alive. I tried to speak, to call out, but my throat tightened and my voice refused to work. The figure didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence, yet I felt every inch of its attention as if I were under some unspoken scrutiny. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoing in the quiet, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig somewhere deeper in the cemetery. I wanted to leave, to run, but my feet were glued to the spot and my eyes couldn't look away. Every night since that evening, the cemetery has been alive in ways I can't explain. I catch glimpses of shapes moving along the tree line, always just out of reach, sometimes closer, as if testing the boundaries of my property. There's no pattern, no logic, just a persistent presence that sits in the corners of my vision and refuses to blink away. The neighbors shrug it off, calling it overactive imagination, but they don't live here. They don't hear the soft, deliberate scraping of soil that comes when the moon is high. The sound so faint you almost convince yourself it's nothing until it happens again. Closer, more insistent. It starts subtle, a slight disturbance in the night air, and before long it grows, a rhythm that seeps into your chest and claws at your sleep. Sleep has become a luxury I can't afford. I lie awake at night, listening to the cadence of the cemetery, the whispers that start low and rise in intensity until I feel as though I'm being pulled from my bed, drawn toward the graves themselves. Sometimes it sounds like someone walking along the perimeter of my property, careful and deliberate, never close enough to be seen, but always near enough to be known. My dreams are invaded by the same shapes, moving silently, their attention always on me, and I wake with my body drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, the shadows from my window stretching across the room like dark fingers. I've tried to rationalize it. Cemeteries are quiet places after all. Leaves fall, branches scrape against stones, and the wind carries sounds that our ears interpret as something more. But this is different. There's a consciousness here, a presence that doesn't belong to the living or the dead, but something in between. I see the same shadows, the same flickering lights, always in the same patterns, always shifting as if marking territory, observing and waiting. It's a rhythm that the living cannot fully comprehend. A quiet pulse that grows stronger when the wind shifts or when the mist rolls low across the ground. I've tried to document it, taking pictures through my window, but the camera shows only darkness, only empty graves, leaving me to question whether it's real or whether I am slowly losing my mind in the solitude of this place. I've spent hours at the edge of the yard, staring at the cemetery, trying to piece together the purpose of the shapes and shadows. I've called friends over to watch, but no one else can see what I see, can hear what I hear. It's as if the cemetery reveals itself only to those who dwell too close, those who have nowhere else to go but into the darkness. And so I sit, night after night, drawn to the flicker of lights, the whisper of voices carried on the wind, the slow, deliberate movements that refuse to be named or captured. I feel their attention in my bones, a pressure that reminds me constantly that I am observed, that my presence is part of the ritual, whether I want to be or not. The figure I first saw continues to return, though it changes form. Sometimes it's crouched, sometimes kneeling, and occasionally I glimpse what looks like more than one. They never approach, never speak to me, yet the air thickens in their presence, a tangible weight pressing down. I've tried to leave, pack my belongings, and considered abandoning the house entirely. But each time I step into the car, a strange compulsion pulls me back, and I find myself sitting in the dark, staring at the fence line, waiting. There's a lure to this place, subtle and insidious, and I cannot tell whether it's the cemetery that draws me, or the fear that keeps me tethered here. I talk to no one about it. People would call me crazy, and maybe I am. But the dread is real, the sensation of being watched. The soft, deliberate whispers that rise and fall like the rhythm of the earth itself. I've tried recording them, playing back the tapes, but the devices register only static, only the sound of my own voice breaking the silence, leaving the whispers undisturbed, persistent, patient. They wait for me in the same spots, in the same patterns, night after night. I've counted, timed, measured, but there's no logic to it, only a quiet, relentless observation that refuses to relent. Sometimes, late at night, I stand at the edge of the cemetery and speak aloud, asking questions into the dark. The air doesn't answer, but the whispers rise in response, unintelligible, layered, as though the graves themselves are conversing. It's not threatening in a violent sense. It's the patience of time, the weight of history, the understanding that I am small, fleeting, and insignificant in this rhythm that has persisted long before I arrived. And yet it is terrifying because I am aware, conscious of the attention, unable to escape the knowledge that something beyond life lingers here, watching, waiting, shaping its presence around me. I've grown used to it, though the unease never leaves. There's a strange comfort in recognizing the pattern, in understanding the cadence of the night, the rhythm of whispers, the flicker of lights. I know where the shapes will appear, when the whispers will rise, and yet it never becomes safe. I have resigned myself to this existence, to the quiet terror of living beside a cemetery that refuses to sleep. It's part of my life now, as constant as the wind through the trees, as certain as the moon rising over the hills, a companion I cannot see fully but cannot escape. I sit at my window now, as I have for countless nights, tracing the movement of lights, listening to the rustle of the earth, the whispers that come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I tell myself it's nothing, that my imagination has simply grown wild in the isolation of these hills. But when I feel the pressure of unseen eyes, when I hear the scrape of soil in the dark, when I glimpse the figure kneeling or crouching between the stones, I know the truth. This cemetery is alive in a way the living cannot fully understand. And I'm trapped here, an unwilling witness, bound by curiosity and fear, waiting each night to see what moves beyond the headstones, listening for the whispers, and counting the shapes that shift just out of reach. There's no closure here, no resolution, no comforting end. Only the quiet persistence of the graves, the rhythm of shadows moving without body, and the knowledge that I am never truly alone. This story will be written in approx. 2,200 words. I was sitting on my back steps that October night, the kind of night that creeps in slow, heavy with fog that clings to the ground like it's alive. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, and every sound seemed swallowed by the mist, muffled into an almost surreal silence. I had my cigarette, leaning back against the railing, letting the smoke curl into the chill when I noticed it, a faint flicker of light deep in the cemetery behind my yard. At first I assumed it was a lantern someone had left, maybe a caretaker or a wandering kid. But the way it moved didn't make sense. It darted lightly between the gravestones, rising and falling with a deliberate rhythm that no casual passerby would have. My curiosity pricked me. though unease had already settled into my chest like a stone. I leaned forward, squinting through the fog, and that's when I realized something was off. The lights only appeared when I looked directly at them. Blink, look away for even a moment, and they vanished, only to return the instant my gaze found them again. My stomach clenched with a mix of wonder and dread. I tried calling my neighbor, hoping for some rational explanation, but my phone was dead, or worse, refused to work as if the night itself rejected it. The air grew colder, thicker, a damp chill that settled in my bones, and then I heard it, soft footsteps. Light, deliberate, measured, moving closer to the fence line that separated my yard from the graves. I wanted to leave, to step inside and shut the door against whatever it was out there, but something held me. Something rooted me to the steps, my eyes locked on the shifting pinpoints of light. I could feel it then, that sense of expectancy, as if whatever lingered in that far corner was waiting for me specifically, watching, aware. I sat frozen, cigarette forgotten, letting the fog and cold seep into me. The lights began to converge on a small plot, the movement almost purposeful, and I realized my pulse was pounding so loudly I could barely breathe. I don't know how long I stayed there before stepping inside, trembling and shaken, the fog curling around my house like it was reluctant to let me go. After that night, the lights returned. Every evening, without fail, they flickered between the gravestones, persistent, teasing, never staying in one place long enough to fully understand. Sometimes I see shapes crouched among the stones, fleeting glimpses of dark silhouettes that vanish when I blink or shift my eyes. They're always just at the edge of perception, and it gnaws at me. I try to tell myself it's nothing, mistake, shadow, imagination, but the air itself carries a weight when I step onto the porch, a sense that I am being watched, and it's a weight I cannot shake. The nights grow longer and heavier as October deepens, and with the lengthening darkness, the sensation becomes more pronounced. I hear the soft scrape of feet over soil, the rustle of leaves, subtle movements that would be easy to ignore if it weren't for the rhythm they seem to follow. It's as though the cemetery breathes, inhaling and exhaling in a cadence that the living cannot fully sense, only feel. I can't explain why I stay, why I continue to watch from my porch, drawn to the lights despite every instinct screaming at me to retreat. It's a compulsion I cannot name, a curiosity tainted with dread, but one that I cannot resist. One night, emboldened or perhaps foolish, I stepped closer, crossing the fence and into the cemetery itself. The fog wrapped around me immediately, thick and suffocating, dampening the world to muted gray and brown. The lights flickered as before, darting along the gravestones with impossible precision. I moved slowly, trying to follow, heart hammering, ears straining to catch every faint sound. That's when I saw them more clearly. Shapes crouched low, hunched and silent, watching from behind stones, their forms almost human, but wrong in ways that made my stomach knot. Every time I blinked, they vanished, leaving me to wonder if I had imagined them entirely. The closer I got to the small plot where the lights seemed to gather, the heavier the air became. There was a smell now, subtle but distinct. Wet earth, rotting leaves, and something I couldn't name. It wasn't overpowering, just enough to make me feel the presence of the ground beneath my feet and whatever rested within it. The lights hovered near the gravestone in that corner, and for a moment, I swore they were aware of me. They paused mid-flicker as though holding their breath and then resumed their impossible dance. I could feel a pressure in my chest, a tension that made it nearly impossible to draw a full breath. And I realized I was holding myself hostage with my own fear. I never stayed long. I always retreated back home, but each time I did, I carried with me the sensation of being watched long after the fog swallowed the cemetery again. Over the weeks, the lights persisted. Sometimes they flicker in patterns that almost seem deliberate, tracing lines that I can't understand, hovering over graves as if marking them, inspecting them. Occasionally, I think I see more than one figure moving silently in the shadows, crouched, watching, attentive. I can't be sure, and I fear looking too long, because recognition might demand something of me I am not ready to give. The neighbors shrug it off when I mention the cemetery. They say it's just an old place, overgrown and quiet, and I probably imagine things when I sit outside alone at night. Maybe they're right. Maybe the fog, the isolation, the months of long nights have played tricks on me. but I feel it in my bones, the subtle movement beyond the stones, the soft shuffle of feet, the rhythm of the lights. There is an intelligence there, patient and silent, as if the cemetery itself observes me, marking me, tracking my presence with a patience that makes time stretch. I've tried leaving, driving away for hours at a time, but the pullback is almost magnetic. When I return, the fog clings, the lights resume their dance, and the soft footsteps echo faintly behind the gravestones. Sleep eludes me, dreams invaded by flickering lights, shadowed figures, the fog pressing against me in impossible weight. I wake in sweat, pulse thrumming, haunted by impressions I can't shake. Unsure of what is real and what my mind has conjured, the cemetery is alive. Not in the way of life, but in a careful, deliberate presence that I cannot fully comprehend. It moves around me, through me, shaping my nights. I catch glimpses of figures that vanish when I blink, lights that only appear when my gaze fixes upon them, sounds that cannot exist unless something is moving in the dark. And yet I cannot leave. Curiosity, dread, and perhaps some inexplicable tether keep me returning to the porch, staring into the fog, tracing the impossible lights as they dart between stones. Some nights, I whisper questions into the fog, asking who or what is there. The air does not answer, but the lights pause and the shapes still, a silent acknowledgement that I am seen, my presence noted. I have learned to live with it, to accept the persistent watching, though fear never fades entirely. I walk carefully, speak softly, avoid disturbing the earth, and still, the cemetery's quiet insistence shapes my life. There is no closure, no explanation, only the persistent flicker of lights, the crouched shapes behind headstones, and the awareness that I am never alone. Every night I sit and watch, and every night I feel the quiet weight of attention pressing down, patient and deliberate, waiting, marking, never leaving. I don't know if it is a warning, a ritual, or merely the presence of something that has always been here. But I know this. The cemetery watches, and I am trapped in its quiet, inescapable gaze, drawn to it by dread, curiosity, and a strange, reluctant fascination that refuses to let me go. When I first moved into the house beside the cemetery, I thought I'd found peace. It was an old place, built before anyone alive could remember, with slanted floors and drafty windows that rattled when the wind pushed down from the mountains. I liked that about it. The land was quiet, tucked at the edge of a forgotten stretch of Appalachian back road where the nearest neighbor was half a mile away. Beyond my back fence, the cemetery sprawled, a patch of uneven ground, tangled with briars and moss, dotted with headstones so weathered their names had turned to faint scratches. It seemed still, peaceful. I thought nothing could disturb the kind of silence that lived there. For the first few months, that silence became my companion. I'd sit out on the back porch after work, the kind of evenings when the crickets fell quiet and the night air grew heavy, and I'd watch the moon drift above the treetops. The cemetery looked soft under that light, almost kind. There were nights I'd hear the wind slipping through the trees, making the branches sigh, but it was comforting. Predictable in a way the living world never was. Then came the whispers. The first time I heard them, I was half asleep. It was one of those thick summer nights when the air feels syrupy, the kind that presses against you and refuses to let you rest. I woke to what I thought was someone talking just outside my window. Not loud, just faint murmuring, indistinct, like the sound of a radio left on in another room. I froze listening. The voice or voices seemed to drift up from the cemetery beyond the fence. They weren't frantic or angry. If anything, they sounded patient, rhythmic, like speech, but with words I couldn't catch. I told myself it was the wind, maybe air passing through the cracks of old stones or animals moving through the grass. I tried to believe that, but over the next weeks, the sound returned, always on still nights when even the insects had gone quiet. I'd be sitting by the window, book in hand, and a soft murmur would rise from the dark, weaving through the stillness like a thread being pulled. Sometimes I'd step outside, hoping to catch whoever it was, maybe kids daring each other to sneak into the cemetery. But the moment I set foot on the porch, the whispers stopped. Every time, the silence that followed was unnatural, heavy, pressing on the eardrums until even my heartbeat felt too loud. One night, I decided I'd had enough. I grabbed the old lantern I kept by the door, a relic from the house's past owner, and stepped into the yard. The grass was damp with dew, slick under my boots, and the air carried that sweet rot smell that always comes before rain. I moved toward the fence, and as soon as I lifted the lantern, the whispers ceased again. Not faded, stopped, like a switch had been flipped. The silence was so thick I could hear the lantern's flame flickering. That's when I noticed them, footprints in the dew. Small impressions leading from the other side of the fence across my yard, stopping a few feet from where I stood. They were fresh. No drag marks, no animal tracks, just the clear outline of bare feet pressed into the grass. I followed them with the lantern's light until they disappeared near the corner of the cemetery, at the base of an unmarked grave I'd never noticed before. The soil there looked darker, softer, like it had been disturbed recently. The logical part of me said it was animals. Maybe kids sneaking in at night. I even called the local sheriff's office the next morning, but he only chuckled and told me that old cemeteries have a way of playing tricks on the senses. Settling ground, he said. Moisture and air make sounds in the soil. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But when the whispers came back the next night, closer than before, I knew it wasn't just the earth. Over time, the pattern grew stranger. The whispers would come and go unpredictably. Never loud enough to understand, but always enough to make the hair on my arms rise. They'd drift across the grass, circling the house, stopping whenever I turned on a light or opened a door. Some nights they sounded like a single voice. Others, like several layered atop one another, blending into something that wasn't quite human speech, but close enough to unnerve me. Sleep stopped coming easily. When I did drift off, I'd wake to shadows moving at the edge of my vision, leaning shapes near the tree line, crouched forms among the stones. Each time I blinked, they'd vanish, leaving only the faint shimmer of dew and the memory of motion. My mind began to fracture under the weight of exhaustion and fear. I started to wonder if the cemetery had always been like this and I'd just never noticed. One night, around 2 a.m., the whispers grew louder than ever before. They were right outside my window, distinct now, as if a conversation were unfolding inches from the glass. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt the cadence in my chest. Soft, deliberate, coaxing. Against every instinct I rose, grabbed the lantern, and went outside. The moment I stepped into the yard, the murmurs faded, replaced by a faint rustling sound, like fingers brushing against fabric. The air was colder than it should have been for midsummer. My breath came out in pale clouds. I shone the lantern toward the cemetery, and there in the faint glow I saw movement. Not one shape this time, but several scattered between the stones, leaning, crouching, as though caught mid-step. My hand trembled, the flame inside the lantern fluttering with it. I blinked, and they were gone. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was charged, alive. I don't remember going back inside. But I woke the next morning in my chair by the window. Lantern burned out. The first light of dawn creeping across the grass. My boots were still damp. When I stepped outside, the dew was undisturbed. No footprints this time. No sign anyone had been there. But the soil near that unmarked grave looked darker again. Almost freshly turned, and I swear I could see faint impressions around it. Like something, or someone, had knelt there during the night. The whispers didn't stop after that. They became a constant companion, sometimes faint as a sigh, sometimes close enough to make the glass vibrate. I tried recording them once. The playback was nothing but static, though when I listened closely beneath the distortion, I thought I could hear my name. I threw the recorder out after that. As the weeks passed, my world shrank to the space between the house and the cemetery fence. I stopped going into town. I stopped answering calls. All that mattered was watching, waiting, listening for the next whisper. The cemetery wasn't just beside me anymore, it was in me. The line between the living and the dead blurred so slowly that I barely noticed. Last week, I found something new. Near the base of that same unmarked grave, half buried in the soil, was a small object, an old rusted locket. When I pried it open, there was nothing inside but a scrap of fabric and something that looked like a lock of hair, brittle and gray. I don't know why, but I put it in my pocket. That night, the whispers came back louder than ever. They didn't sound angry, but there was urgency in them, like a plea. When I reached into my pocket to touch the locket, the whispers stopped completely. The air fell still. I should have thrown it back, buried it, done anything but keep it. Yet something about it felt important, like a key to understanding what the cemetery wanted from me. Now I keep it on the table beside my bed, and every night as the wind dies and the world goes silent, I wait. The whispers start in the distance, then move closer, surrounding the house in a slow, deliberate circle. I no longer try to decipher them. There's a rhythm to their language that's almost comforting now, familiar, as if they're trying to teach me something I'm not meant to learn. Sleep has become impossible. Shadows move across the walls, though no light shifts to cast them. Sometimes I hear the creak of the floorboards, slow and measured, as if someone were walking through the hall. When I open my eyes, the house looks the same, but the air feels different, thicker, charged with a quiet that hums just beneath the surface. I've stopped fighting it. There's no use pretending it's anything other than what it is. The cemetery is not just a resting place. It's aware, patient, watching. The whispers are its language, the rhythm of something ancient that doesn't need to show itself to be felt. I don't know if it wants me to stay or to leave, but I've realized that both options are the same. No matter where I go, the whispering will follow, quiet and steady, just beyond reach. Sometimes, when the night is still and the fog rolls in low, I catch a glimpse of movement near the unmarked grave, shadows shifting like breath under the earth. I stand at the window listening, the locket heavy in my hand, and I wonder if I've already become part of it. Another forgotten presence among the stones, whispering to whoever moves in next, waiting for them to listen.